Welcome everyone to Experts on Employee Experience. Super excited for today's session. We'll be featuring Bethany Nicole Smith from Justworks. She leads workplace program management within Justworks. And our conversation today will be super insightful. Before we dive into all of that, we're Epoch. Why we host these webinars is to share learnings. We know lots is changing in workplace employee experience, from how employees expect the workplace to be there for them to leadership and what they're requesting. So our whole goal is to spotlight leaders and innovative thinkers like Bethany, to just put out there things that they're observing or experiencing and things that are going successful or even challenges that they're also facing. So with that said, Bethany is really passionate about the intersection of DEI programming, inclusivity, and how we bring that into the workplace. So with that, to kick us off, Bethany, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll dive into our conversation today.
Hello, thank you so much, Jade. My name is Bethany Smith. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, they, them, and theirs. And I am very excited to be here with you today. As Jade mentioned, I am the Senior Workplace Program Specialist at Justworks. Basically, what that means is I'm in charge of project managing all of our internal processes, as well as making sure that we are offering a robust on-site event program at Justworks. In addition to that, I am also the current leader of our employee resource group called Square One, and that is the community-led space at Justworks that is dedicated to amplifying and uplifting the needs and experiences of the women people at Justworks. And since it's Women's History Month, Square One has a lot going on, but I'm very, very happy to have this conversation with you.
Amazing, Bethany. Thank you so much for sharing that. And everyone that's listening in today, if you have questions along the way for Bethany, feel free to put it in the Q&A section or within the chat, and we'll either address it on the spot if it's timely, or we'll wrap it up at the end. And if everyone, to kick things off, want to share how they're feeling today as an emoji, that would be amazing to kick off the chat box. But with that, in terms of what you'll be learning from Bethany today is her thoughts on amplifying employee community spaces, DEIB practices, and programming within Justworks, and much, much more. So with that, let's get started. So Bethany, I know you mentioned it's Women's History Month. I know Justworks is doing a lot for that. So maybe let's start with that in terms of how that's going and how you all are scoping it out for the month.
Absolutely. One thing that I think is really interesting and awesome about Justworks is the way that our employee resource groups play with our other departments. I think that I'm a perfect example of that, right? Because I'm literally on the workplace team in charge of programming on site, but I'm also the lead for Square One. And so there's a really good interplay between a cross-functional nature of the programming that we have at Justworks. And I think that that is a really key piece in making your programming, especially when it pertains to equity and DEIB and things of that nature, making it effective. And so we have a lot going on for Women's History this month. We are doing several things. One thing that we're doing is an internal only podcast called The Square One Show. We are dropping an audio episode every Wednesday that focuses both on what's happening in the month, because every Wednesday this month is a special day. There's International Women's Day, there's Equal Pay Day, there's the first day of Ramadan. So we're going to touch on all of those topics with internal folks, internal women at Justworks, to amplify, their thoughts and their experiences. And then we are offering to the Square One cohort, specifically the women of Square One, we're offering them a mentorship workshop that we have been gifted by AWE, which is African American Women in Tech. We are also hosting a panel discussion with several tech leaders in the space, where we're discussing how to make yourself more marketable as a woman in tech. And then that's going to be followed by a mix and mingle, where those folks can network with each other and our hiring managers for the purpose of getting more Black women hired into tech roles at Justworks. We're also having a couple of internal only, just like open conversations about things that our women folk are engaged in. So, for example, we're having a literacy conversation about investments. We are having a conversation about, you know, gendered language. For example, we're having a talk about whether we are going to spell women with the X or not. We're doing that in collaboration with our ERG Outworks. And we're also having a movie night where we are doing that in collaboration with our Black ERG and our AAPI ERG called 60%. And we are streaming everything everywhere all at once and then having a follow-up conversation with A24. So
Oh,
lots,
cool.
right? We're very cool. Lots of stuff going on and at different lifts, right? Oh, we're also having a mix, just a party at the end of the month as well.
That is really robust programming, Bethany. So I'm sure everyone here is curious how you all even came up with that, or how you all knew like this would work.
Well, I think that we've sort of seen things as it pertains to the ERG. We have 7 employee resource groups right now at Justworks and another one in the works. And so because we have so many different community-led spaces, we've been iterating on programming for at least 3 years now as an organization. We had ERGs pre-pandemic. And so we got to see what worked before the pandemic. We got to see how things pivoted once we were completely virtual. And now that we're in this hybrid reality, one of my responsibilities with my workplace hat on is figuring out how we're going to improve our workplace offering to folks in lieu of our new hybrid reality. So I think we've had a lot of opportunities to test and experiment. And so we can double down on what works. And what we know works is having sort of a wide offering where people can pick and choose what way they want to engage with programming in general. I found, some people don't want to come to anything, right? Like they don't want to go to an event. They want to be able to just chat with you in a Slack channel or engage with some resources that you are putting out there, or they want to do a volunteer opportunity on their own time. Then you have people who are really more engaged in making connections with their fellow colleagues. And so they want this space to do that because we've been trapped in our homes for a year. And then you have people who are really about, wanting to change policy or wanting to do something that is directly benefiting women. So you offer a little something so that anybody who wants to engage has an opportunity to engage. And then the other important piece is delegating so that it's not one person shoving content to everyone else. It's who needs to do what to give Justworks the experience that we need, right? Square One isn't even driving all of this programming. Workplace is doing some of it. We're having snacks from women-owned businesses. Blackworks is doing some of it. Several of our other ERGs are doing some of it because there are women across every different, intersectionality and demographic. So the short version of that answer is sort of doing the experimentation, doubling down on what works, and knowing when to delegate and having a really good cross-functional culture.
That's awesome. And I think this Women's History Month is such a good example of how we can dive into how it works in terms of like what you've seen to be effective. So when you're like planning this, even Bethany, and you mentioned there's a lot of cross collaboration happening, like how far in advance are you all thinking about this? And like even booking someone to come in from A24 to like give a talk, I'm sure was such a lift. So how does that all play out? And like, what are some learnings that you'll take for next year or the next program?
It's a very interesting question. I would say that I'm never not planning. Is that the right way? So
You're always thinking.
I'm always on it. And it's like when we do our OKR time, when we are doing our regular strategy, whenever we are taking a step back as a team to figure out what is the goal for our team going forward, that's part of what I'm working backwards from. So I've been the co-lead of Square One for 6-ish months now. And at the top of the fiscal year, that's when everyone did their OKRs. My workplace team did our OKRs. The company did their OKRs. And I was just like, I don't know if you're supposed to do OKRs for your employee resource group, but that's what we're going to do because I don't know how else to make all of my plans ladder up. That's the framework that I understand. So our goal for the year, our word for the year as an ERG is intersectionality. And so I know that everything that and legacy, because I want the next co-lead not to have to start from ground zero just because should I get another job or something of that nature. And knowing that, that really helped inform things like I want to do a podcast, because a podcast means that there's a really easy and digestible way for people at Justworks who've never heard of Square One to understand what we're all about, understand who all is a part of our group, and figure out interesting ways to get involved and get active. So even though it's only going to run for the month of March, it lives and will help funnel more people into our group. And then because I also know that what I want is intersectionality, I'm just like, I need to be figuring out ways to partner with the other employee resource groups and other cross-functional teams. So I'm looking proactively for moments that make sense. And I work very closely with my cross-functional stakeholders all of the time. So I think I come to mind when there's a collaboration opportunity on their end as well. For example, the movie night, Everything Everywhere All at Once, had absolutely nothing to do with me. I didn't think of it. It wasn't my idea. 60% was like, we're doing a movie night. I think that it should happen it's happening in the month of March. March is Women's History Month. We should just cross promote and tell everybody that this is what we're doing. And A24 got involved because there's a relationship between A24 and Justworks. And so leaning on your network is another really important way. So to ask how long have I been planning this? We did our OKRs 6 months ago, but I think I began planning Women's History Month in earnest at the top of the year, because I think it takes at least 30 days to do just the minutia. And so I was like, let me give myself some time.
And then you mentioned that you all launched this internal company podcast.
Yeah.
And it's only going to be ran during the month of Women's History Month, but then the content will live on.
Right, exactly. We're going to get new episodes every Wednesday in the month of March for now. However, I'm a retrospective type of person. So I'm definitely going to crunch the numbers, give some insights to my wider team. And we've talked about like launching a podcast more broadly. And I think that we might be able to pivot this into sort of an internal communication channel that we keep always on.
That'll be so awesome. We're definitely seeing that across different companies, like an internal company podcast to your point, like deliver information and allow people to engage passively.
Absolutely. I think it's so innovative, especially I think people are ready for something new as it pertains to internal comms. You know, we're all newslettered out a little bit, I think.
And with that, Bethany, your role is like workplace programs. It also sounds like you have oversight and ownership across different programs as well. So how do you think about your role? Because we know different companies are defining workplace in different ways.
Yeah, I have really been thinking deeply about this. And I think that my role is very much about manifesting company culture on site. I really think that that's my whole job description, right? Some of that is internal communications, but not all of it. Some of that is programming, but not all of it. Some of it is project management and administration, but always for the purpose of trying to make our coaches' values manifest themselves in our employee engagement experience, our workplace experience offering. How do we do hybrid? How does that feel? What does it feel like to work at Justworks? What does it feel like to go to an event at Justworks? Even something as simple as what does it feel like to be onboarded at Justworks or to search for information at Justworks? I'm very, very interested in how I can improve the experience for my end Justworks user and make it feel coaches, make it feel like our brand values.
Yeah, you also mentioned that you all set OKRs 6 months ago. So how does that look like for you, and how has it been tracking now that it's been like 6 months?
Interesting question. Tracking OKRs is actually very, very difficult. And
It's so difficult. Our company just rolled it out. I'm like, so I'm so interested in a workplace perspective, what that looks like.
Lord have mercy. So our entire company everything ladders down, if that makes sense. So our company sort of decides this is the direction that we are going in. This is our strategy. This is what we're thinking about. And then we leave time for each of our team is the wrong word, but like departments to then take the company OKRs and decide, okay, if what Justworks wants to do is be the most amazing place to work, what does that mean for your job function, for your department? And then each department rolls out their OKRs. And then once everybody is aligned on your departmental OKRs, and I'm not sure how it works on other teams, but on our team, once we decide what our OKRs are, then we decide what are the mandatory projects that are going to get us moving toward those OKRs. So for example, we are doing OKRs right now for the upcoming, and we are focusing on preparing and rebuilding, just because we have had to reorganize our internal team a lot. And so what projects, what does that mean, right? Like we wrote our OKRs out so that they're smart and that they follow all of the acronyms and that they're doing all the things the internet says that they need to be doing.
What are you doing
But
the most?
right, it is. But after that, okay, we want to increase whatever to this percent by this time. Fine. How do we do that? What project is that? And then we delegate those projects out, and we use internally Asana to track everything. And so I am the Asana manager person, right? I project manage all of our things. So it's set a goal in Asana, create the projects that are going to ladder up, delegate them outwards. And then my manager is the person who keeps us all on track. And are we doing this? We have a quarterly report that we put together. And then I think at the end and during comp review cycles, what we are talking about as individual contributors with our manager is, have we executed on those projects the way that we intended to? And is the team having the outcome that we intended to have based off of those projects? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no, not really.
Yeah, we always say we want to set our OKRs really ambitious. Like you should be scared of not achieving them, and you might not.
Right.
And I guess like in terms of the projects that you're excited about this coming year, Bethany, I know you mentioned that there's a few that pertains to achieving your OKR. Like what does that look like?
Absolutely. So one ongoing project that I have been working on is I've been working on a hybrid work project. Started off being sort of research and discovery to figure out how do our staff members feel about RTO? What do they need as it pertains to hybrid work? But like really specifically in the office part, whenever you come to the office, what do you want that to feel like? What are you doing while you're here? Does the space work for that? And then after we did the research and discovery, we put together some deliverables that were going to help speak to the needs that we discovered in our research and discovery. And two of the things that we're about to launch, we've launched and are like making them live now. So one of the things that we're doing is a Nest in Your Neighborhood campaign. We felt that people really needed to sort of reorient themselves to being in the office, less that, they don't know how to act, and more that, everybody is used to privacy. And so there's a different clamor for conference rooms than there used to be. What's the edit? How do I know who is sitting where? If it's not my team agreement day, how do I find, the office feels different to me when my whole team is here versus when it's just me coming in because I've got a meeting. And just rolling out things to help our teammates acclimate in a hybrid universe, and then helping them to optimize their day when they are physically on site. One of a really interesting insight that I found after like doing our survey data and chatting with focus groups is that we have team agreement days. And so that's the day that you and your team are supposed to be in the office together. And people found that because things are still hybrid, a lot of folks were coming to the office on their team agreement day and still having back-to-back Zoom meetings. Waste of time. You didn't come to the office for that. You came to the office literally to bump into someone in the hallway and have a conversation with them and have a synergy with them. So just helping our managers understand how better to prepare their teams for your on-site day, giving our individual contributors some resources to help them orient, working with L&D to make sure that those resources fit with the way that everybody is already used to learning at Justworks.
Cool.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I do want to ask about like nesting your neighborhood and what that's all about. But in terms of resources that you would equip people with, and it sounds like workplace collaborates with L&D to create this content. But like, what does it look like? Is it like wiki pages? Is it like videos? Is it like a training?
So for now, what we are offering is we have an internal wiki, yes, and we are going to put something on our internal wiki that is like a one-pager. I'm calling it the on-site optimizer. I love an alliteration.
Oh, hold on. That's a good one.
Right?
Love
So I'm
it.
calling it the on-site optimizer, and it's pretty much just a one-pager that directly answers some of the needs that we found in our focus groups, how to set up your day for, optimum productivity, and then also linking to existing resources that help orient people to the space, right? Places to meet. What's the difference between a huddle room and a focus room? Which one of the rooms have tech in them? Did you know that the conference rooms, like there are whiteboard cameras. You don't need to carry your laptop, just helping people understand how to use what is already here, because a lot of that information exists already, but aggregating it in a way so that if what you want to know is how do I make my day work better, all of that information is in one place. And then it's actually a really good segue to the Nest in Your Neighborhood campaign, because we are sort of having a lunch and learn style moment that is helping people understand the other small fixes that we have made to make it more fun and make it more cool to be in the office. Things like we've added more interactive maps in various places so that you can sort of zoom in and say, this is where I am. These 3 conference rooms are available. Is that the one that I want? We've updated Envoy so that you can sort of see who is in your area, who's going to be on site that day. We've reallocated our space so that the teams that are sitting together, it makes more sense. So for example, it was very difficult to figure out where we were going to put customer success and sales because they spend their whole day on the phone. And so, right, it's just little things like that. And then we are also, the fun part about it, we have, our neighborhoods have like mascots. And so we are offering the ability we made these templated cards that match your neighborhood mascot so that you can sort of see at a glance what team is sitting where. We've created name tent templates for people so that they can, if they would like, make their name tent to be on their desk. And we're also going to start like a contest where you can design your own flag with your team that can be displayed physically in the office in your area. Just wanting people to be more invested in the space.
That is so creative. So when you say like nest your neighborhood, it's like the neighborhoods within the office.
Yes. So it's like fall in love with your area.
Oh, that's so awesome. And yeah, Bethany, I know you mentioned that you did a lot of focus groups and surveys. What other interesting tidbits did you get from it, or other things that are like challenges ahead that you and your team are excited to tackle?
This brings it full circle back to the DEIB, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that we found is people who have like chronic pain conditions, neurodiversity issues, sensory input issues. They were just like, I have no idea where to be in the office. My desk is fine, but only for like 20 minutes. The conference rooms are fine, but I feel like a jerk taking over a conference room just because I have sensory overload. So what we are doing as the workplace team is we are partnering with one of our ERGs, Just Ability, which is geared toward our neurodivergent folks. And we're creating our quiet space. Like we're taking one of our common areas that is sort of tucked away in a corner, naturally quieter than other spaces, and really making that bespoke to the needs of the people who are having the issues. So we had a whole separate focus group with them, and they are giving us rules for that space. And we're changing the lighting and adding white noise and desks in the huddle rooms that are in that space, and you'll have to book it. Just, I think what's really important is actually touching base and listening to your people, and then finding a way to understanding what their actual problem is. People complain a lot, but there's a real genuine need underneath all of that. And once you know what the genuine need is, you can iterate on it.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, Bethany, you have a really good pulse of like the needs of the company, the workplace. And also you have really strong connections across the company with the ERGs to different like just teams. How did you establish those? Or how would you recommend someone else that's like entering the workplace role or have new mandates and responsibilities on carrying that forward and mimicking what you're establishing?
That's a really good question. And I'll be honest with you, I want to be even more intentional about the relationships that I build at work. I think some of it is just natural charisma, right? Like I think some of it is just natural, but I think when it comes to being intentional and giving advice to someone who that might not be their personality, I think it's really important to just be intentional, right? Understanding who even are the key stakeholders, right? It's one thing to say, I would love to have a cross-functional energy, but
Yeah.
across which functions, right? Like, who are your sister teams? Who do you, and I say get in bed with. I feel like workplace and IT need to be best friends. Workplace and people experience, best friends. Like there are so many folks, marketing, best friends. And the reason why I need to be best friends with marketing is completely different. It's because they get a lot of packages and they have all the swag and they have all of the answers into what would make my event more cool, because they have a vendor and they know how to tie it to something that the company is doing. We are
Cool.
very into DEIB because they have insights into what our people want that you wouldn't be able to get elsewhere, right? You know what your people want when it comes to business need, but you don't necessarily know what your Muslim faith folks need from the organization in order to feel safe. You don't really have another avenue to say, how can I protect the trans people at my job? And that's a reason why I think the relationship between DEIB is important. And then whoever does your internal communications, like I just think understanding who you need to be playing with nicely and why, and what information or what do the other functions have that you need? What do you have that they need? And understanding that first is really key into understanding how to connect with those people and those departments. Being
Yeah.
besties with your finance team, someone in the comments, Katie, I have to uplift this. I can't believe that I didn't say that you need to be in love with finance, procurement. Otherwise, nothing ever gets purchased. Okay.
I love that, Bethany. That is such great advice. Clearly, from the chat, people are stoked about that. And I guess kind of touching on what you mentioned earlier, too, like employees have a lot of thoughts and feedback, especially as it pertains to now like RTO. It's kind of like a hot topic slash like touchy topic for a lot of folks that are now transitioning from remote to like seeing what it means to be back in office. So how are you thinking about that right now? Or in terms of like even measuring success and collaborating that with feedback, how does it look like for you and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So we thought about this a lot, and Justworks is a hybrid organization. We really saw when we were doing our research and discovery that there was almost like two lanes, and this was months and months ago. So at that time, there was like the Slack way of things, where Slack was just like, you don't have to come in except for these couple of points a year and it's fine. And then there was like the Tesla approach, where it was just like, come back or you're fired. And Justworks wanted to be very much in the middle. We think there's something magical that happens when we are able to meet in person, and there's a synergy and a manifestation of our values that doesn't happen when we're fully distributed. But we also really believe in our people, and we really believe and saw firsthand that productivity didn't go anywhere. And so we don't think it's never going to be come back to the office or you're fired, but we do want to leave the space for our teams to come, to collaborate, to interact, to meet with each other, to do the cross-functional thing. And so now, almost a year into the universe's RTO, a year and change, depending on when you started, we're sort of seeing a trend where even the most giving of companies are sort of backtracking on the RTO model, and it's becoming very much more come back to the office. And Justworks just doesn't feel that way. We just don't feel that way. We're very much staying hybrid. We're very much leaning into our team agreements. We want you to come on the day that you're supposed to be here. But other than that, we're really about giving our people the autonomy that they need to be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of it, to your point, from different companies is like coming down from leadership in terms of the expectations of in office culture or what it means to be hybrid. And I guess like with that, like how do you get leadership buy-in or work with leadership for a lot of your programs or how you shape the workplace?
That's another really good question. And I think I'm very lucky at Justworks that we have leadership that wants to be involved. They want to be involved. They want to know what's going on with you. For example, my SVP of people operations, she has regular quarterly check-ins with individual contributors. I was a contractor and she put time on my calendar to meet with me. And our CEO is the same way. We've had Ask Me Anything sessions the whole time, So I think that level of transparency and that level of a willingness from the top down is huge in that. And I think also, when you asked before, I think that intentionality, my C-suite, my leadership team, my board members, I care very much what they think, what they need, what they're looking for, because not that all of the program we're doing is for my leadership team, but I care very much what they think about all of my programming. So I'm very intentional about making sure that I know what they care about the most as it pertains to their different, role functions. What do you want from the workplace?
Yeah, how would you do that, Bethany, or like recommend someone that like doesn't have leadership that is as proactive and like connecting with you?
I think finding out where your leadership dispenses their information is key. Is that happening in a leadership meeting, a C-suite meeting, an exec meeting? Who do you know that knows what happens in those meetings? Some of the stuff is none of your business, right? Like it's above your pay grade, but your leadership team are not people that you're not allowed to speak to. So just getting to know them, proactively reaching out and saying, hey, what's going on this quarter, right? When OKR time comes down, there's going to be a memo that says what the company cares about, and then taking that memo and maybe dissecting it with your manager or your department head to say, what does this really mean, right? It says that we're trying to retain great people. It says that, this fiscal quarter, we're going to be focused on being, I don't know, say your company wants to offer more products in your product suite. If I'm on the workplace team, I don't know what that means. What do we offer? Just figuring out what the company is doing. That's more what your leadership is working on. So our roles in employee engagement can be pretty siloed to our people experience. But understanding what the wider organization is doing and what the wider organization cares about will help you understand what your leadership cares about, and then you can sort of pivot based on personality.
I love that. And I do want to mention, I know we're at like the 10-minute mark. So just like 2-3 more questions for you, Bethany. And for the audience tuning in, if you have any questions for us, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A section. But I do have to ask you, Bethany, just based on like leadership and what we're hearing out there, everyone's trying to do the most with the least, like budgets are getting stretched. Are you seeing that at Justworks, or like, do you have any observations or advice for everyone?
Oh, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Yes, we're definitely trying to do, I wouldn't say the most with the least, but it feels fiscally irresponsible to not change your behavior in an economic downturn. That just seems like you're flirting with something we don't want to flirt with. So we are trying to be fiscally responsible. We are trying to be conservative, and that does impact what kind of events you can have and whether you can do things to the same level as before. I will say we are looking for lower touch options, so that we can offer things to our staff that is not necessarily as expensive as we were doing before. Maybe instead of full-on lunches, we'll do smaller surprise and delights. And also, I think workplace very specifically, we have, and people experience, we have the opportunity to, we're already paying for so many things that are not optional. Do you know what I mean? And so what can we do with that ups the experience? For example, I have to feed you. Even though our budgets have been cut, there will never be a moment where there is not coffee and there are not snacks. So is there something fun that I can do with the coffee and the snacks, making them following the affinity months of our DEIB team? We're doing women-owned snacks and women-owned coffee. Justworks is a PEO, so we have a lot of companies on Justworks. So trying to highlight our companies, seeing whether or not, like, our lending library is completely fun. All of the books there are by McNally Jackson, which is a Justworks customer and a Black woman-owned business. Just little things like that. Having a lunch and learn instead of maybe a party. For the end of Black History Month, BlackWorks put on a Family Feud event that was so fun, very free. You know, we had an amazing time.
I love that. That is such great advice, Bethany, and like such concrete examples too. We do have some questions coming in, so we'll address them at the end. Just two last questions for you, Bethany. Like, lots of great programs, like from Black History Month to Women's History Month. How do people find out about these at Justworks?
Ooh, you gotta market internally. Internal marketing, nobody talks about that, but internal marketing is a thing. You gotta pepper the Slack channels, also having enough lead time so that you can market. We market things in a bunch of different places. We have digital signage throughout the space that's running always on. We email to the relevant distribution lists, and there are relevant distribution lists is the key.
Like targeting the audiences.
Exactly. Do you need the managers to know something ever so slightly different than you need everybody at your company to know?
Oh, cool.
Do you want your managers to help push the message, right? So I literally give a call to action to my managers where I'm just like, can you talk about this in your next team meeting? Just little things like that. And then, yeah, just talking about it absolutely everywhere. Putting it on the calendar with enough lead time. That's a big one.
I love that, Bethany. And that is super helpful as well, just in terms of making these successful. But with that, we are getting some questions in. So I'm going to wrap up with our line of questions, Bethany, and then we can move on to the Q&A. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Amazing. So I guess, like, for you, Bethany, in terms of like you being the cheerleader and staying creative for workplace experiences, like, I guess the question is just like, how do you make sure that like you're taking care of yourself, but also like, how do you think about your role as it like transform, of like why you even got into this in the first place?
I got into this because I love people. That sounds so corny, but I'm a people person. And it's also really, really important to me that I want people to feel like they belong at work. I want you to love coming to work every day. And I think that the way to do that is, making sure that we have great people for you to work with, but that the experience is specific to you and that we're listening to you and not necessarily the market. I care about what my Just Workers want and not necessarily what, employees in general want. And then as it pertains to taking care of myself, I think it can definitely be difficult. There's a lot of different pieces, and remembering to rest, learning and knowing when to say, I cannot do that actually. And having people who you trust and going to them as often as you need to. I have a couple of mentors at Justworks that I'm very grateful for.
That's amazing, Bethany. Well, that wraps up my questions today. We'll hit the Q&A up, and then we'll wrap up with your final thoughts, Bethany. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Amazing. So one question that we got I think it's an interesting one. Like in terms of gamification strategies to increase employee engagement and retention, do you see anything's coming in trend this year?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Kirk, I think honestly, if I'm being honest, I think gamification was like had a real moment a couple of years ago. Everybody was talking about gamifying things and like adding badges in
Mm,
a million and one places. I think in terms of what I think is useful to you and what I think is going to remain effective for gamification is rewarding people for engaging in whatever way that makes sense to you, in whatever way it makes sense for your organization. I think train doesn't sound like the right word, but I think you can almost train people to expect that something good will happen when they engage with your content, right? And that can be as simple as I consistently show up in my Square One Slack channel, so the women in my Square One Slack channel know that if they ask a question, they will get an answer, right? Something as simple as that, a shout out, a piece of swag, a gift, a day off. You know, I think that less gamification and more dedicated rewards for engagement.
yeah, it definitely sounds like everyone basically just wants to be seen and heard and really acknowledging
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
That's a great advice. And then in terms of one last question here, in terms of balancing virtual versus in-person experiences, I know you mentioned, Bethany, that Justworks is hybrid. So yeah, how do you think about that? Or what do you think works?
The balance is we try to do everything, as many things as make sense, both, right? I want to, the equitable thing to do is to make it so that your people who are at home are having a, excuse me, a similar experience to the people who are physically in the office, or at the very least, that it is not a glaringly, blatantly obvious thing where the office got food, we didn't get anything. And so we try to offer a Zoom experience that will coincide with any on-person experience that isn't specifically for networking or like building something together. And we have also adapted our culture so that hopping on a Zoom, there's an experience with that too, right? Like we uplift the chat. We make sure that when we're doing a team meeting with a Zoom, that there's a screen where you can see the faces of the people on the Zoom the same way they can see our faces. We only do that. We only have hybrid meetings with microphones. We've been very intentional about the way furniture is set up so that you can sort of see the whole room. And it doesn't matter if we're in the multi-purpose room and you're getting a cup of coffee in the back, you still feel just as engaged in the meeting as you would if you were sitting down and giving me your undivided attention, right? So I would say the short answer to that is we try to do as much as we can in both directions. The experiences are not equivalent. And understanding that when you go in, that means, for example, if I'm going to give the just workers in the office a full meal with servers and things of that nature, it's not really comparable to just send a Uber Eats credit, right? Because it's just like, were you ready? Did you have it in time? So sending a meal that is similar to the meal that we are having to your home with a cute little flower so that when you put it on your desk, you're having a slightly different experience is what we aim for. I acknowledge that it's hard to do that. And I don't think that figuring out how to make the experience equitable for the people at home and the people in the office isn't necessarily, I think that's something that needs to trickle down, right? I think that that's a leadership decision where it's just like, are we offering the same thing? Are we trying to, what's the point? Are we trying to get people to come into the office more because there was a reluctance? Are we trying to get the people who are in the office to connect more while they're here? Are we trying to make our people who are at home feel better about the fact that they're at home? Because you know what I mean? You have to understand what we're trying to do.
Totally. Like really clarifying expectations. And
I think that's from leadership, honestly.
Yeah, very specific to each organization and culture for sure.
Yeah.
Well, with that, Bethany, I know we are hitting time. So I do want to give you space to wrap up with any final thoughts that you want to leave with the audience. And then we'll have the wrap up portion.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that employee experience is a kind of a buzzword now, but to me, it really just boils down to making sure that whatever your company values are show up everywhere in your organization and helping your people be able to do their work in your space.
I love that, Bethany. Those are wonderful ending words. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today with Bethany. Bethany, how can people connect with you?
Meet me on the LinkedIn's, folks. My name is Bethany Smith on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you. We do coffee chats. I'm ready to make a friend.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone again. And thank you, Bethany. Today's conversation was so insightful. There were so many actionable items that I think everyone's going to take away from this conversation. But with that, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We're Epoch. If you ever want to chat more about things that Bethany chatted about today, or just, someone that we should spotlight, let us know. And also, I'm going to share our LinkedIn post here for you to engage and connect with afterwards. But thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Bethany. We'll chat again very soon.
Ciao, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.